and welcome back. Emily Jean if you're new here, and today I'm going to review The Marvelous Misadventures of Ingrid Winter. This was the worst rated book on my GoodReads Want to Read, and I loved it. So I'm so excited to maybe bring some good news to this book. Maybe encourage somebody to read it and somebody else to fall in love with it, because I actually adored this book. So if you want to hear all about it, grab your coffee, grab your tea, and let's get cozy. Okay, so this book was written by J.S. Drangsholt. It's a translated book that was originally written in Norwegian, and it is beautiful. It is beautiful. It is touching. It's about Ingrid Winter, who is a literature professor, a mom, a wife, and boy, does she have some serious anxiety and depression. I think what's gone wrong with this book is the title and the cover art, because I definitely originally thought that this was going to be a quirky adventure story about a mom, and like you'd get a little bit into the mom life, but you'd mostly have humor and quirkiness. The title makes me think like Marvelous Misadventures will get like quirkiness, right? The cover art feels very quirky. No. This is not the book. So I do think if a lot of people are going into this book expecting quirky, funny, they are going to be disappointed. So in that case, the low ratings make sense. But if you go in expecting for the portrayal of a mom who is dealing with a lot of anxiety and overwhelm, I think you will be pleasantly surprised. So we've got Ingrid Winter, and there's a few minor conflicts. Like, I like to share with you guys the main conflict of the book, but there's a few minor ones that you could consider the main conflict. They're trying to sell their home. She goes on this work trip, and there's like this lost icon, so the recovery of the icon, which I think is a just translated word for like statue or drawing. And then work itself is kind of, there's conflict going on there, but I really feel like the main conflict of this novel is Ingrid with herself. Ingrid's conflict with her own anxiety, dealing with some of the delusions that she's having, with some of the things that have been following her most of her life. I think that is the main conflict of this book. And I think that the author does it really, really well. And then I also kind of like to share what is going to be answered by the end of the book, but I don't know that there is any main question being answered other than maybe, can you be okay living with anxiety? Can things be okay when you have a ton of anxiety and depression and that's your day-to-day life? Can things be okay? I guess that would be the question that we answer by the end of the book. So we basically follow Ingrid through a span of her life, not very long, maybe 6 months. I don't think it even goes quite a year, but we follow her story at work, kind of the work colleagues who are so frustrating. Oh, if I had these work colleagues, it would be so hard. So we deal with her work colleagues, we deal with some poor life decisions that she's made, and kind of her coping or not so much coping with these things that are coming up. It's not very quirky. There's some humor parts, but mostly you're just seeing real raw anxiety and depression presented to itself. It did have the right amount of weirdness for me. There are moments that are like really weird. You're not sure like if the book's still like on track or not, and I think that's perfect for portraying anxiety and depression, because sometimes it just goes a bit too far to the point where you're like, is this reality? Are these normal thoughts to be thinking? So I think the book did that really well. And it's an honest look into the life of a burnt out mom who is struggling with anxiety, depression, and mind-numbing coworkers. So who would I recommend this book to? I would recommend this to you if you are a mom, parent, healing from anxiety. I don't necessarily think that it would be an enjoyable read if you are like in the midst of it right now, if you're actively seeking counseling or considering it, it might hit a little too close to home, and it might make you more anxious about the things that you're anxious about already. So I would say if you're pretty far into your journey of finding some strategies and supporting yourself where you can laugh at moments of anxiety, then you'll probably enjoy this. If you're just a burnt out, tired parent, you might enjoy this. If you're a literature professor or work at a college, you might enjoy this. I think this book is more enjoyable if you are able to relate to the characters. Sometimes we read because characters are very different from ourselves, and sometimes we read because they're very similar. And I think in this case, it's a good read if you feel connected to the characters based on your personal life history. I would also recommend this if you do like contemporary literature with like some nudges to am I losing my mind or not? Like some nudges to that mental stability, then you might enjoy this as well. And as far as my CAWPILE went, I gave it an 8 for characters, 6 for atmosphere. The atmosphere it wasn't anything like super magical, but it did a good job of being the atmosphere for the book. Writing was an 8, plot was an 8, intrigue was an 8, logic was an 8, enjoyment was an 8. So that rounded out to 7.71, giving it 4 stars. Okay, so that is almost all I can share for spoiler free. Now we're going to move into the spoilers, where I share a little bit more about the pros and cons and share specific details. So if you don't want to hang out for that, I hope you have a beautiful day. And if you do want to hang out, here we go. So, spoilers, cons, preschool teacher shaming, like what the heck? What the heck? If you've read this, you know that the whole literature professor team that she's on, the academic kind of colleagues that she has, they're all fighting to not be reassigned to the preschool teacher program because it's like the worst job you could have, working with kids. Oh no. Which I know not everybody wants to, but they also make it sound like it's easy or it's going to be boring, which I did teach preschool for 1 year, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but it's hard work. It is hard work to be a preschool teacher. It's not like easy peasy coloring with crayons and, hanging out with little kids all day. It's hard work. It's really hard work to manage a classroom, to figure out how to engage them, to be sometimes the very first time that they're learning structure of a classroom and learning how to read and write and numbers and all the things, right? So it's a tough job. So it was really strange to me that they were fighting not to get placed in it. A little bit of it made sense because, of course, if you're a literature professor and you want to be focused on research, you don't necessarily want to be a preschool teacher. So the reassignment in itself was weird, but specifically the way they talked about preschool teachers, I thought was a big con in this book. I didn't like it. It didn't make sense. And that was pretty much the only con I had. I think it was really well done. I think the characters were perfect for what was intended, and I thought the translation, it didn't seem like anything was lost in translation, so no other cons that I could pick out. Pros, it's not flashy. It's reality. Maybe that's a con for some people. There's no flashiness in this book. There's no big surprises. It is just a contemporary fiction talking about reality, talking about this woman's life. So that was my biggest pro for this book, is it just felt real. It felt real, and sometimes I want the sci-fi, sometimes I want the fantasy, but more and more I'm realizing that I want the real. So this was really nice and provided that experience for sure. And then I wanted to share some of the things that I tabbed. Usually I'm just tabbing quotes or things that like made me really emotional, really angry, really happy, made me laugh. But I wanted to share some of the reasons that I think this is a really great portrayal of somebody who is dealing with anxiety and depression. The way that she writes about it, just you can tell that either she researched it a lot or she's had some personal experience with this. The first thing that really jumped out at me was actually something that Ingrid was making fun of. She was talking about how in the morning she scrolls through Facebook and it's like the first thing she does. And she doesn't know why she does it because it's usually just filled with silly quotes and people's photos of their animals and kids. When she was referring to one of the silly quotes, the silly quote itself kind of blew my mind a little bit. And the quote was, "All the days that came and went, I never realized those were life." And I know that could probably be a cliche, but for whatever reason, it hit home in that moment. And I was like, whoa. It sounds so cheesy trying to explain it to you guys, but it really just hit me in the heart. Sometimes things just lock into place and you're like, yes, appreciate that present moment. Appreciate where life is today. Appreciate, for me, being in the midst of a mom with a toddler and keeping the house clean and working from home and all of these kind of things, like just being in the present moment with that instead of waiting for the next phase. The next thing that was really struck me was she was talking about when you can tell that anxiety has really started to make a huge impact on your life and that things have gone far from normal. And it was when she had said, "I sat in the car thinking about how one of the signs of imminent doom was that the contrast between Monday morning and Friday afternoon had been erased." So typically we are really excited on Fridays. Monday comes the dread to go back to work. And what she was saying was that the dread didn't go away on the weekends. And that's how she knew she was like in the midst of a real anxiety overwhelm episode. And I thought that was just real. That made sense. You have no reprieve from it, and that's when things get really, really hard. If you find yourself in any of these, I would highly recommend reaching out to a mental health professional. There is no shame in it. Help yourself, because this, a lot of times when we're in the midst of anxiety and depression, we think it's normal. We think that that's because we can operate in it, that it must not be that bad, but it is. Get yourself support, get yourself help, maybe medicine, maybe psychotherapy, just something to help you. So if any of this resonates with you, you might want to consider that. It's my little PSA. I'm not a mental health professional. I just experienced it myself, and there are supports out there that could help you. Just because you can cope with it doesn't mean that you have to. Get some help and see if you can feel a little bit better. That is actually really apropos to lead into this next quote, which is a little heavy. So she was talking about being really stressed out, and she said, "If only she could give me morphine or anesthesia or something that would let me lie totally still in bed and sleep, or put me in a coma just for a few days or a couple of weeks until this was all over." So if you've ever found yourself super overwhelmed, feeling like the weight of responsibility and just not wanting to be responsible, and like daydreaming about if I could just be sick enough in a hospital bed or just be in a coma, then this is the type of energy that this book brings, which sounds so depressing, but the way that it's done, it is done really well. It's just talking about stress and overwhelm, and when we get to these places of just needing a break, whatever form or shape that comes in, just needing a break. Then as we get more into the book, she starts to lose it a little bit more. You can see like the tendrils coming apart, losing kind of that grip on reality. Her strategies aren't working as much, and she says, I'm trapped in finite infinity, and I would never find my way home." This is what she was worried about, that she'd never find her way home. Not in time, not in space, not on the inside, and not on the outside. This is when you really start to lose yourself and you can't find a tether point. And then she's kind of gives us some background into her past, and she starts to describe like, "My entire youth had been filled with strategies, counting 10 yellow houses, jumping over puddles, avoiding shadows, walking only on the left side of the streets, thinking positively, anything to ensure my survival." So this isn't a recent development for her. She's been trying and pushing for so hard for her whole life to kind of fight off this anxiety, and that gets really, really exhausting. She did get like a head cold at one point, and she said, "I recovered after a week, but the loneliness wouldn't release its hold on me." So even when you've recovered from the thing that's bothering you, the lingering emotions are really difficult, and this book describes those really well. There may not be a specific thing going on, but you're still feeling that anxiety and depression. And then she gets to the anger phase. So we get real angry when we're tired of fighting so hard, but we don't see a way out of it. And so one of the last things that I bookmarked was her saying, how angry she was getting. She was so tired of movies scaring me, tired of worrying that someday I would wake up in a Matrix pod, tired of remaining vigilant, on the lookout for men who might be walking around wanting to make a woman's suit out of my skin. Like, she's tired. She's tired of being scared all the time. She's tired of worrying all the time, and she just needs a break. So, all in all, I thought this was a really good, accurate depiction with brief moments of humor to break it apart just enough that it was just an incredible read. And it is actually the first in a duology, so I've already ordered the second, and I cannot wait to read it because this will be a keeper on my shelves. Okay, that's all that I have for today. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully I'll see you in another one very soon. Bye, guys.